Hello friends, Nayaswami Hriman here today, broadcasting to you on our weekday channel of the original teachings, writings of Paramhansa Yogananda. I was just reviewing his original set of lessons, which at the time in the 1920s he called the Yogoda lessons. Yogoda, that which imparts yoga. Now, he made various lessons throughout his life, especially in the 20s and the 30s and into the 40s. So there were different versions of the lessons, and some of them are consecutive, like the Yogoda lessons, the super advanced lessons, super advanced, and so forth. They cover a wide range of topics, and at the same time he would publish his magazine monthly or bi-monthly and write articles on the Bhagavad Gita, articles on the interpretations of the Bible, especially the New Testament. And then his magnum opus was the story of his life, the autobiography of a yogi. And then in between that, I think one of his first books in America was his collection of poems known as Whispers from Eternity. He also had his original book that, while he didn't write it in English, came from his source notes and thoughts that he transmitted to the writer, which was The Science of Religion. This was the theme of his teachings, which is that the practice of yoga is something that can be done methodically, sort of like saying we are all Methodists because we have a method of concentration, internalization, focus, and so on. There are bodily components to the practice of yoga, of course, the asanas, the yoga postures, but he actually gave something new to yoga. His contribution specifically was the energization exercises. I'll just mention in passing that we have a 3-part Saturday workshop beginning this Saturday, which I think is April 2nd, and that'll be both online and in person on the energization exercises. But in any case, in his Yogoda lessons and his various metaphysical teachings, he points out that, whereas different schools of thought will say that God is unknowable and unnameable, beyond name and form, and all these very esoteric things, Yogananda had a very classic and simple way of boiling things down. He says that as God has made all things, we'll just start with that as an assumption, then what do we observe in our most basic nature? Well, we observe that we observe. In other words, we have a kind of a mental makeup, intelligence. You might want to call it intelligence, depends on you, but we observe things. Through the senses, we can see different objects, we can see different people, and we have thoughts about what we observe. But the fact is we can be and are observant. And so that ability to have the capacity for the intelligence to observe must therefore be, logically at least, a reflection of the intelligence, the ability to observe of God, of the infinite spirit. But the other thing that we can say of our experience of life is that we move around. We see things around us changing. And so we have a heartbeat, we breathe, we eat, we sleep. And so the twin aspects of the human experience, which is the ability and the habit to observe, and whether or not we comment on what we observe or classify it is secondary, because primordial to the classification of things is the ability to observe them. So if you want to get back to the basics of what God might be, we can say we have perception, we perceive, we observe. But secondly, we at the same time, simultaneously or otherwise, we move. The world moves. Objects around us move. And these then are the twin aspects of the world as God has created it that can be focal points for our meditation. And the practices of meditation are an intertwining of the power of observation with the movement of objects or energy, the fact that things move, that there is motion and movement, vibration. And so there we have in the metaphysical teachings the appearance of the creation in the twin aspects of perception and motion, reason and feeling. Okay? And this is the basis for the creation. But getting back to meditation, trying to keep this a little bit more practical, we can develop either simultaneously, but for the sake of using words, we can develop our power of observation. How do we do that? By concentration on one object at a time. Yogananda defined meditation as an act of concentration upon God, or one of the aspects of God. It can be asked, has been asked down through the ages, how can man see God? Well, I don't really want to go into that. I don't see him out there in my window anywhere. But can we observe something in that direction? Okay, but that's a never mind, because we have to focus on what we can observe, all right? That we want to focus on that we are able to observe. And the best way to do that is to have one-pointed observation. And so we can open our eyes and do that. There are forms of meditation where you light a candle and look at a candle. I remember early on sitting in front of a blank wall, being told that, you should sit in front of a blank wall, representing, I suppose, the blank mind, or at least an affirmation of it. That's all fine. But in what Yogananda taught, he said the eyes should be closed and ideally half closed. But that's very difficult for a beginner to do because of the distraction of objects. Light just went off. The distraction of objects in the field of vision. So for most meditators, closing our eyes softly, not tightly, not squeezing them, is the best way to start. Now, most of you listening to that know that we were taught, Yogananda taught, and not exclusively, but by no means do all meditation teachers teach this, which is to raise the eyes to the point between the eyebrows. And so we focus our gaze there. So there, in that simple way, we can develop our power of observation, of unbroken perception. Now, Patanjali says we can, and Yogananda said we can also focus on astral perceptions. But when we get down into that, then we get into the second aspect of consciousness, which is motion. And so for that purpose, that one motion that doesn't ever stop, so long as we are in the body, is the motion of the breath. Now, it's also true that the heartbeat continues, but and you can focus on the heartbeat, but Yogananda and most of the rishis who perfected the art of meditation and the science of it will say, focus on the breath. There are reasons for that too lengthy to get into for this simple broadcast, but let's just say that for our purposes of combining those two aspects of divinity, which is the intelligence, the power of observation, and the observation of motion, vibration, movement. Those are the twin aspects of meditation. And so we watch the motion of the breath. In advanced techniques like Kriya, we watch the motion of prana as it flows through the subtle or astral body. There are other things that we can focus on as well, but those are the twin aspects by which we can achieve. My real point in this is to go beyond metaphysical speculation. And the point Yogananda brought was, how can we know God? How can we experience divinity? How can we experience, and putting those words aside, which are still very metaphysical, what is the essence of our being? The essence of our being is the power of self-awareness coupled with the inextricably linked movement that we are aware of. Now, in the mindfulness aspect, where it goes out further, we're aware of our thoughts and our emotions, but those are all come and go. And so what I'm talking about, what Yogananda's talking about, is if we can get down to our essential being is our self-awareness and motion circling around or being observed by our self-awareness. This is the essence of our experience. And Yogananda said, when we observe these things, when we enter into this act called meditation, we are experiencing divinity. We are knowing God. We are perceiving God. And that's such a freeing concept. I know and then he mentioned that the attributes of that Godhead, the attributes of our soul, the attributes of what he called superconsciousness are those 8 aspects, most notably for the average person, peace. And after that, joy. After that would be energy, meaning the movement, the flow that I've been talking about of the breath or the energy in the body. Those are the 3 easiest aspects, like entrance doors, especially peace. Most people want to meditate because they want to get away from stress and anxiety. They want to feel peace. And so peace has been said to be the guardian of the inner castle of consciousness. That's not a literal or a linear explanation of meditation, but it's certainly true that peace is the easiest aspect of that nature to feel. And what nature am I speaking of? That nature of perception, of observation, of self-awareness that isn't colored by my name, by my personality, by my thoughts, by my memories, by my emotions. In other words, when observation and perception is perfectly still, we can feel peace, not as a conditioned awareness, conditioned on anything other than being still, but unconditioned by the 5 senses or thoughts and so forth. We can actually experience peace. And that observation, that self-awareness of peace, I, thou, is the direct perception of God. This is the gift that Yogananda brought to the world, from a world that has been so focused on the Godhead as being on a throne or being unknowable, imperceptible, judgmental in some cases, all those things that you have to die to get there and experience it. The immediate perception of unconditional peace or joy or energy is the direct perception of God.